Hello, good day to everyone. I hope you are keeping well and in good health. We come to you live from Quezon City, Philippines. Thank you for joining us for the second installment of the Migration Outlook webinar series. Last week, we focused on the topic, May Bukas Pa, the children of OFWs in the time of COVID-19. Today, we continue to explore the psychosocial aspects of the pandemic on overseas Filipino workers and their families in this episode on COVID-19 and Beyond Experiences of OFW Families. My name is Marla Asis, Executive Director of the Scalabrini Migration Center, and I will be moderating this webinar with Dr. Melissa Garabiles. As I had mentioned the last time, the idea for this webinar series was motivated by wanting to do something about the disruptions brought about by COVID-19. The challenges we acknowledge are overwhelming, and the need to understand what is unfolding and how we can support migrants and their families inspired this webinar series. In this spirit, the University of Hong Kong and the Scalabrini Migration Center, and in cooperation with the Episcopal Commission for the Pastoral Care of Migrants and Itinerant People, came up with the Migration Outlook webinar series to shed light on the challenges and concerns experienced by migrants and their families, to consider insights from researchers and practitioners, and with a view to propose suggestions and possibilities to support migrants and their families weather this pandemic. This modest initiative will also come up with infographics that will provide information to promote well-being and to share information on services that migrants, their families, and the general public may access. The Migration Outlook webinar series is supported by the University of Hong Kong's Knowledge Exchange Initiative, which aims to make knowledge and research-based evidence more widely shared and translated into policies and programs that will improve lives. This goal also jives with the idea of knowledge and research as public good. In our kamustahan or conversation today, we are joined by three OFW couples, a researcher, and a counselor. The three OFWs are among those who returned to the Philippines recently. Unlike past crises, the repatriation of OFWs during this time is more complex because of travel restrictions, quarantine requirements, and fears about contagion. In fact, the fear of contagion initially inclined some local government units not to accept returning OFWs. Perhaps for the first time, OFWs are stigmatized and experience discrimination in our country. As of July, according to the OFW help data of the Office of the Undersecretary of Migrant Workers Affairs, 70,386 OFWs are back home due to COVID-19. In the earlier months, sea-based workers dominated the number of repatriated OFWs. The July 5 update shows a closing of the gap between land-based and sea-based workers. Of the total repatriated OFWs, there are now 34,760 land-based and 35,696 sea-based workers. Our conversation today will throw light on how the unscheduled return of OFWs impacted on the OFWs, their spouses, and their family life. Allow me to acknowledge our online participants. We are joined by OFWs, families of OFWs, migrants associations, researchers, professors, teachers, counselors, pastoral workers, decision makers, government officials, and representatives of international organizations. We have participants not just from the Philippines, but from other countries as well: Belgium, Canada, China, Italy, Hong Kong, Japan, the UAE, Qatar, and Thailand. We will try our best to provide a summary in English for statements made in Filipino. We will be showing the summaries on the screen, and we ask for your patience in advance because it might take time to show the translation. We will have room for questions and comments, so please use the comment section of this live video as we will be taking note of your comments and queries and will try to address them the best way we can. If you recall, our partner, the Episcopal Commission for the Pastoral Care of Migrants and Itinerant People, invited ANAC OFWs to share their reaction to our first webinar. I will announce the finalists and the top 3 best reaction papers towards the end of the seminar. Let me now introduce my colleague, Dr. Melissa Garabiles, who will be handling the next discussion. Dr. Garabilis is assistant professor and clinical psychologist at the Department of Psychology, Ateneo de Manila University. She is also a volunteer psychologist of UGAT Foundation. She is a member of the Global Community Mental Health Department of Psychology, University of Macau, where she did her postdoctoral fellowship and where she is also a faculty collaborator. She has published widely on mental health, positive psychology, and migration. So, Melissa, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you for your introduction, Dr. Marla. And good afternoon to all our viewers and to our speakers. So today we are blessed to have three OFW couples who will share with us their experiences. In all three couples, the husbands were repatriated due to COVID-19. Our first OFW couple is from Antipolo City, Rizal. We have Mr. Wilfredo and Mrs. Grace Pamposa. Mr. Wilfredo used to work in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia before coming home. Our second couple is from Caloocan City. We have Mr. Archival and Mrs. Regine Arce. Mr. Archival was a seafarer and used to work with Princess Cruises. And our last couple is from Cavite. We have Chief Officer Teodoro DJ Rosello, who was also a seafarer, and his wife is Dr. Rosary Charity Rosello. So good afternoon, ma'ams and sirs. So after we listen to the stories of our OFW couples, we will listen to insights from research. We will have Dr. Lucy Jordan, who is an associate professor and associate dean in social work at the University of Hong Kong. She is the co-principal investigator of the CHAMSI project. CHAMSI stands for Child Health and Migrant Parents in Southeast Asia. She will share with us their findings on families and migration. Lastly, we will listen to insights from practice. We will have Father Nilo Tanalega, the founder of the UGAT Foundation, which is an NGO based in Ateneo de Manila University. UGAT Foundation has conducted programs for OFWs and their families. Father Nilo is a psychotherapist and lecturer in the same university. His background is in family counseling, pastoral counseling, grief counseling, and family ministry. So before we listen to our speakers, I just want to remind everyone and encourage everyone to please post comments that hopefully we can read all your comments later as we go on. And please post questions as well. We will have time for Q&A later and you can ask questions to your chosen speakers. So let us begin. First, let's go back to our OFW couples, starting with Mr. and Mrs. Pamposa, followed by Mr. and Mrs. Arce, and lastly, Mr. and Mrs. Rosello. Okay, so good afternoon, Sir Wilfredo and Ma'am Grace Pamposa.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon,
Yes,
ma'am.
good afternoon po. Oo. So ma'am, pa-share naman po, tell us about your family. Paki-describe po yung family nyo, where you're from, how long you've been married, ilan po yung kids, etc. po.
Ah, ako po si Mrs. Grace Pamposa. Asawa ko po na sa Saudi po siya galing. Dito po kami nakatira sa Antipolo. 3 po yung anak namin. Ang panganay ko ay 22 years old na, lalaki. Tapos ang pangalawa po, babae. 20 years old na po. Tapos yung bunso ko po is 19 years old po. Babae din po.
Okay.
Lahat po sila ay kolehiyo na po sana sila. 3 po sila nasa kolehiyo na po sana. Kaya lang nung nagkaroon ng problema yung kumpanya ni Papa niya, natigil po yung dalawa. Tapos isa na lang po yung nagpatuloy sa pag-aaral. Tapos galing po kaming Iloilo, bali 5 years pa lang po kami naninirahan dito sa Antipolo.
Okay.
Tapos,
So, Mr. Wilfredo is from Saudi.
Yes
And
po, ma'am.
then, all kids po, college students. But you
Opo.
mentioned there's a problem. So, the 2 of 3 will stop po
Opo.
studying this semester po. So we'll talk about that further later po. Balikan ko po yun mamaya. So to Sir Wilfredo po, pa-share naman po yung experiences of being an OFW. When did you start working abroad? Kailan po nag-umpisa lahat? Your work po, and how your work was before COVID. Bago po magka-COVID, kumusta po yung trabaho ninyo?
Ako nga pala po si Wilfredo Pamposa, galing po ng Saudi.
Mm-hmm.
Nag-umpisa po ako nagtrabaho sa Saudi po noong 2008.
2002. Mm-hmm.
2008 po. Nung
So 12 years.
unang kumpanya ko po, Muhammad Al-Mujil, 2015, bumagsak din po. Hindi din po kami nakakuha ng mga benefits namin, sweldo, bali 5 buwan na sahod, 7 taon na benefits ko po, hindi ko po nakuha. Tapos po, lumipat po ng ibang company nang hanggang 2019 po. Nag-exit po ako pero yung ikama ko po, hindi na rin yun ng kumpanya ko. Yun po, hindi ako pinauwi kasi hindi ako po makuha ng exit visa. Hanggang inabutan po kami ng pandemic, hanggang asikaso na lang po ng Buluua para makauwi kami po. Yun po.
Okay. And before pandemic po, plan nyo na po mag-stay? Did you plan to stay abroad po?
Opo.
Opo. Mga how many years pa po kaya?
Mga 5 years pa po, hanggang makatapos yung 3 anak ko po.
Okay. The plan was stay abroad for 5 years.
Yes po.
Wait for kids to finish.
Yes
Okay
po.
po. So, how did you feel po when you learned that you had to return to the Philippines? Ano pong naramdaman niyo nung sinabi sa inyo, kailangan man nang bumalik?
Masaya kasi nakasama ko na po yung pamilya ko. Malungkot naman po kasi hindi kami binayaran ng kumpanya ko po, hindi binigay yung sahod namin po. Yung sa pangalawang kumpanya ko din po, ganun din nangyayari sa una kong kumpanya na hindi din kami binayaran. Hanggang kami na lang po nagbayad ng ikama namin po para makakuha lang kami ng exit visa. Kami po nagbayad ng penalty namin para makakuha lang po ng exit visa para makauwi ng Pilipinas.
Okay. So parang mixed feelings. Happy you'll be with your family, but also sad kasi hindi nabayaran.
Hindi nabayaran po ng kumpanya at saka yung sahod po na hindi binigay.
So salary, hindi nabigay. And kayo pa yung nag-abono, you had to pay.
Yes po.
Okay.
Kami nag-abono po para makakuha ng exit visa.
Or exit visa.
Yes po.
Okay.
Opo.
So when you were going home na po, yung pauwi na po kayo, ano po yung mga pumapasok sa isip niyo? Your thoughts when you were going home po?
Masaya kasi makikita ko na po yung pamilya ko sa mahigit na 3 taon ako doon po na nung nagbalik ako po nung 2016 hanggang nakauwi po ako nung May 18, 2020. Masaya na kasi habang pumunta kami ng airport, masaya sa ko makikita ko na po yung pamilya ko.
So back home after 3 years.
Yes,
and then
po.
pag dating niyo po dito sa Manila po muna?
Opo.
Opo.
In quarantine
so,
po kami.
Yes. Saan po kayo na-quarantine?
Sa Cubao po, sa Crest Hotel, sa Cubao.
Okay. Quarantine po for how many days po?
9 days po. Lumabas yung swab test ko to 6 days. Negative yung result. Tapos pagdating naman 9 days, nirelease na din po kami, pwede nang makauwi.
Okay. So 9 days in quarantine. While you were in quarantine po, habang nasa Cubao kayo, ano po yung mga pumapasok sa isip ninyo?
Yun po, sana yung pumapasok sa isip ko po, sana bang negative lang po ako sa swab test. Tapos malagpasan ko na po yung na to para yung mga problema namin, kung ano yung mga problema sa pamilya kasi ito po, nanikuan na kami po nag-uupa ng bahay.
So, iniisip niyo po yung financial,
Yes po, financial.
finances po.
Opo, kasi umuwi ako po, wala kaming pera, hindi kasi may binayaran ng kumpanya ko. Yun po.
So, napag-usapan niyo po ba ito ni Mrs.? Were you able to discuss this with Miss Grace po?
Yes
Itong
po.
mga kumusta po yung pag-uusap ninyo tungkol dito?
Kasi po nag-standby pa po ako sa Saudi mahigit 1 taon eh. Kasi nag-exit po ako noong April 6, 2019. Yun po, na-exit yung ikama ko po, expire. Hindi nga ako po makuha na ng exit visa kasi yung ikama ko po, expire. Ayaw i-renew ng kumpanya ko. Sa 1 taon kong standby po, wala akong kahit 5 na pinakadala sa pamilya ko po. Sa 1 taon kong standby at wala kaming sahod.
1 year standby.
Opo, 1 year standby ako dun po.
Hanggang sa naabutan ng pandemic.
Hanggang naabutan po ako ng pandemic.
Until 2020.
Oo
So,
po.
kay Mrs. Grace po, how did you feel po when he returned? So, after how many years bumalik siya, ano pong naramdaman ninyo?
Masaya po, ma'am, kahit wala pong pera, at least nakauwi ng safe. Yung pera naman makikita, yan, importante. Safe siya. Gabi-gabi, nag-pray kami na sana makauwi siyang ligtas. Sabi ko, okay lang yan, kahit walang pera. Yung pera, makikita naman yan. Basta okay lang siya.
So, happy he's home. And then, prayers po, mukhang nakatulong po yun. How about po yung children po, your kids? How did they feel po when he returned? Ano pong naramdaman nila nung nakita nila ulit yung daddy nila?
Masaya din po. Ang sabi naman po ng mga bata, okay lang, kahit walang pera. Basta si papa nila, araw-araw nga nung nasa quarantine area si papa nila, araw-araw nag-aano sa tinitingnan nila yung kung nakalabas na yung result ng ni papa nila, kabado din. Siyempre, dami nilang magkasama doon, hindi mo alam yung Kaya nakita namin na negative siya, tuwang-tuwa kami.
Ano po yung mga problems or challenges po that your family faced during this time?
Madami po. Una-una po sa financial. Yun po. Kasi before po nung pandemic na to, talagang nag-standby siya doon ng 1 year. Walang padala. Kami lang po ang ng mga bata, tulong-tulong para lang makakamsa ang araw-araw namin.
So, financial problem po. And then, sabi niyo po, tulong-tulong. What did your family do po? Paano po kayo nagtulong?
Nagtitinda pa kami ng ihaw-ihaw.
Oh, ihaw-ihaw. Nag-business. Okay.
Opo. Tapos yung isa kong anak, yung bunso po namin na tumigil, po siya, dito lang po sa kapitbahay namin, may tinitingnan siyang bata, grade 3, tapos hinibigyan po siya ng magulang ng bata. Tapos, yung isa naman, yung pangalawa, nagtututor din po dito sa kabila, yung bata din, tinuturuan niya. Yun, kahit po paano,
nakatulong po. So, business, work as tutor. Ano po yung kinds of support or help that you need? Ano pong suporta yung pwede kayang makuha ninyo para makatulong sa inyo?
Ano lang po, ma'am, gustong-gusto ko po talaga makatapos lang yung mga bata. Kahit lang po, basta makatapos lang po sana sila ng pag-aaral.
So, yun po talaga, children first talaga para makatapos sila. And last question po, how do you feel po about the future? Ano pong nararamdaman ninyo tungkol sa hinaharap?
Siyempre po, sa ngayon po na may pandemya, parang nakakatakot din. Pero sabi ko nga, kahit ano pa yan, basta magtutulungan lang, mag-pray lang lagi, tapos mag-ingat.
So, magtulungan, yes, help each other, pray.
Yes po.
Okay po. So, thank you po, Mr. Wilfredo and Ma'am Grace. Balikan ko po kayo mamaya.
Yes,
Sige po,
ma'am.
thank you po.
po.
Thank you. And now, we will listen to our second couple. So that's, sorry, before that, let me just read some of the points. So their main concerns right now are financial because Mr. Wilfredo has had problems at work even before COVID. So parang nagpatong-patong. So problems before COVID and then post-COVID. So that's their main concern, but um, they have ways of dealing with this problem together. So the family at home started a business, ihaw-ihaw business, and the children also contributed, worked as a tutor to smaller children. So thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Pamposa, for your for the interview. Next, we go to Mr. Archival and Mrs. Regine Arce.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
good afternoon po. Good afternoon, sir and ma'am. Yes, so your turn po. So,
Ma'am, narinig niyo ba yung malinaw, ma'am?
malinaw po. Yes, klaro. So, ma'am,
Malinaw po ba sa inyo, ma'am?
yes po.
Narinig niyo po?
So,
Okay.
okay. Medyo may delay ng konti. So, kay Ma'am Regine po, can
Okay
you
po.
tell us about your family po? Pa-describe lang po ng family ninyo.
Yes po, hello, good afternoon. Kami po, ako si Regine RC po, kapatid ng asawa ko, Archibald RC po. 16 years na po kami kasal, ma'am. May isang anak na dalagita, 19 years old, nasa kolehiyo po siya. Ito po kami sa Bagong Barrio po, Caloocan City, sa Diocese of Caloocan po.
16 years together, one child. Kay Sir, ano naman po, Archibald,
Yes po.
pakwento naman po, sir, your experiences as an OFW. Kailan po kayo nag-start mag-work? What was your work? Kumusta po yung work before COVID po?
Yes, ma'am. I was started October 2004. So, 15 years na po akong seafarer. I started for lower rank po. Bali sa accommodation department po ako. So, I started for the lower rank po until na-promote po ako as si stateroom steward po. Yung mga naglilinis po ng cruise line po ako. So, ang barko po namin is ng last ship po na nasakyan ko, yung capacity is 2,000 guests and 900 crew po ang capacity po ng last ship na nasakyan ko po.
So, malaki yung barko nyo.
Okay,
Many
po ang trabaho.
Yes. So, 15 years na seafarer.
Ibigay ko lahat ng needs ng family ko, especially yung anak ko. Yes po.
So, very okay at work. 15 years, matagal din po
So,
na seafarer.
Yes, ma'am.
So, before po mangyari yung COVID, plan nyo po ba mag-stay abroad? Did you plan to continue working as a seafarer?
Yes, ma'am.
Opo. Mga how many years pa po sana?
Actually, ma'am, ang target ko talaga is hanggang 50 years old lang po sana ako. So, 41 na po ako ngayon. Years pa po sana. At that time po, graduate na rin, hopefully, graduate na rin po yung anak ko noon at that time. So that, gusto ko kasi spend yung matitirang buhay ko sa wife ko with my daughter kasi kung nag-stay ako ng 25 years sa barko, it's enough na po yun para siguro naman medyo stable na sana ang family ko kasi graduate noon, 50 years old po ako. So nangyari po itong pandemic. Ano po kung hindi ko po alam, no idea po kung kailan makakabalik because they need to produce a vaccine first to be safe yung pagpapasyal ng mga pasahero po. So wala akong assurance kung kailan po kami makakabalik at that time po.
So sana the plan was 9 more years and then for good to stay with the family. But right now, we're not
Yes,
sure.
for good po.
Mm-mm.
So,
Mhm. So, nung nalaman niyo pong babalik na kayo, ano pong naramdaman ninyo?
actually po, sad kasi galing po ako sa long vacation noon eh. Last December po is October 3, 2019 po. Then I was 5 months vacation. Bumalik po ako is February 16. Then po, 1 month lang akong nakaroon ng passenger kasi po February 16 to March 18 po nag-declare na po ng lockdown, so we disembark po yung guests nung March 18. So 1 month lang po ako nagka-work ng work with the guests. So yung parang full salary lang po. Galing po ako ng naubos ko dahil naghaba ng bakasyon po, then may pinaayos pa po ako. Hindi ko po in-expect na, wala akong nakaka-expect na mangyayari itong pandemya. So hindi ako naging ready, honestly po. So yun nga po, nagkaroon ng pasero, not enough para maging savings. Then binayaran kami naman ng company namin, bigyan kami ng kahit pa paanong tulong. So papasalamat pa rin po ako sa company namin. So hindi po handa. So malaking learn po ito para sa akin na yung nangyari sa pamilya, sa pandemya. So ulitin po kung makakabalik po ako sa trabaho ko, talaga yun. Kasi hindi learn po kung mangyayari po ulit.
So, biglaan talaga, no? Kaya hindi nakaplano.
Yes.
So, share naman po, sir, nung pabalik na po kayo, ano pong mga pumapasok sa isip niyo?
First po wala pa po kasi ako until now, wala kaming maisip na pwedeng business at that moment. Kasi kung online naman po, napakami sa lugar namin nag-online. And hindi kumbaga sa masyado na pong marami. Wala akong maisip na iba na maging negosyo para makatulong. At this moment po, wala po talaga akong maisip. Kasi sa dami po ng nasa lugar po kasi ako ng lahat ng tao nag-online business po Unlike po sa mga ibang lugar na ilan lang sila. So wala po talaga akong maisip until now po. Hopefully, makaisip po ako ng may magbigay po ng way sa akin kung ano dapat namin gawin para mapasurvive sa pandemic na to.
So, nasa isip nyo anong pwedeng gawin, what you could do, but mukhang need help po makaisip ng mga paraan. So, nasa isip.
Yes.
Tapos po, sir, pagdating nyo ng Manila,
Yes.
na quarantine po kayo?
Ganito po yan. March 18 po, nung binaba namin yung mga guests, nag-iisip na po yung company namin ng plan. So ayaw na kami papunta ng Australia, ni-lockdown po, ayaw magpapunta ng mga cruise ship. So nag-decide po yung company namin na dalhin na kami sa Manila kasi ang Philippines lang po nag-accept na ang cruise ship na pwedeng lumapit. So ngayon po, dumating po kami sa Manila ng April 17. So dinala na po kami ng barko namin para ihatid sa Manila, April 17 po. Then, i-quarantine kami ng April 20 kasi para yun ang gusto naman ng Pilipinas na Manila na i-quarantine kami before ibaba. Then, April 20 po, na-swab po kami April 30. So, after 10 days po, bago kami na rapid test. Then po, dapat po tapos na yung quarantine namin ng May 6. Doon pa lang po kami na-swab. May 6 po. So, nung after swab po namin, lumabas po yung first result is after 1 week po. Kaya May 13 po, nakapagpa-uwi sila ng first batch. All of a sudden po, bali 5 weeks po akong na-quarantine. At saka kami pong 23 katao out of 284 na huling nakababa ng barko kasi tagal po ng resulta na inilabas nila yung pangalan po namin. So, nakababa po May 28 na po. So 5 weeks po akong naka-quarantine bago po ako nakauwi sa pamilya ko po.
So ano pong naramdaman ninyo nung after 5 weeks of being quarantined, your home with Mrs. Regine?
5 weeks na pagkakakulong sa kabina is nawala po lahat yung nakauwi na po. Kasi mas maganda pong makauwi ka na sa pamilya mo kaysa naman po nakastay ka sa po na wala ka naman trabaho, wala kang ginagawa, kumakain ka lang. So, mas better po kasi na nasa pamilya ko na lang po, mas masaya po kasama mo pamilya mo.
Better with the family. Kay Ma'am Regine naman po. Hi, Ma'am. So,
Yes po.
after waiting po, Ma'am, for more than
Hello po,
5
ma'am.
weeks. Yes, hello po, Ma'am. Ano pong naramdaman ninyo when he returned after waiting for a long time?
Yes, unang-una po, masaya ako kasi nakauwi na siya. Kasi sa 5 weeks pong pagka-quarantine niya, andun po yung pangamba ko rin kasi nalulungkot siya doon. Although may pagkain naman sila. Kaso lang, alam mong nandyan lang sila sa Manila Bay, andito lang po ang Caloocan, malapit lang. Hindi mo siya makita. Yung lungkot din na nararamdaman ko na alam mong nalulungkot din siya, hindi mo siya ma-share ng ganon. Kaya sabi ko, tuwa ko na sa wakas nakauwi ka rin. At least, nandito ka na, maasikaso ko siya. Nawala po.
So how about po yung anak ninyo? How did she feel na bumalik na si Daddy?
Yung anak namin dalaga po, makapapa po siya, talagang masaya siya na dumating si papa niya. Kaso po ma'am, sa ngayon, nang huminto muna siya sa schooling niya, first year college po siya ma'am kasi po, yung aside from online class, siyempre po dahil wala pong trabaho, yung pang tuition fee namin sa private school po kasi siya, i-stop mo muna siya ma'am. Kasi wala pang support. Hindi namin po alam kaya babalik sa trabaho.
Yeah. So, problem rin po sa family.
Pero masaya naman po kami kasi andito siya.
So, happy you're together after a long time. Pero na-mention niyo po na may financial challenges din po, ano? Ano pong ginagawa ninyo para maharap itong problem na ito?
Sa hourly debluhan po. Busy po ako sa pagre-repack ng mga goods. Ako in charge sa repacking. Yung isip ko po na po-focus doon, yung stress ko po na nangyayaring pandemyang ito, parang nasi-set aside. Although busy po ako sa kagagawa ng mga binibigay ko ng simbahan namin, andun po yung focus ko lahat. Minsan nga po hindi ko na siya naasikaso dahil yung trabaho ko doon, nandun na po lahat, nakasentro po sa pag-repack, kasamahan po namin na walang-wala po talaga ma'am.
So, nakakatulong yung pag-work ninyo para rin maka-release ng stress po. Tapos po, last question po, how do you feel po about the future? Ano po ang nararamdaman ninyo tungkol sa hinaharap?
Ako po, yung pangamba ko ma'am, kasi siyempre po, hindi naman po sapat yung ipon namin para matugunan yung budget namin sa pang-araw-araw. Yan po, siyempre wala po siyang trabaho. Paano po kami makakasurvive kung wala po kaming income na pumapasok po? Siyempre po, everyday gumagastos po tayo, gumagastos kami, kumakain. Although wala po kaming binabayarang tuition fee sa anak namin, ang problema po, ilan po yung pandemyang ito na kung kailan kami makakasurvive sa ganung ano po gastusin pang araw-araw po.
So, paano po mag-survive financially every day? Okay po. So, thank you po, Mr. and Mrs. Arce. Balikan ko po kayo later.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ma'am Elisa.
Thank you. So, for the Arce family, so the husband had to be quarantined much longer, no? And the same problem is coming up So it's also financial. They're also mentioning, at the same time, there are problems, but they're also saying that they're happy that they're together. And it's better to be together. And they have some ways of dealing with their problems. So before we go to our last couple, I'm going to read a few comments from Mr. Christian Altamirano. So, to Mr. and Mrs. Wilfredo Pamposa, I salute you for your sacrifices, dedication, love, and support to your family. So, meron pong words of encouragement from Mr. Altamirano. Continue to inspire others and do not forget to trust God in times of hardship. Always be strong and positive. God bless you and your family. And we'll have one more comment. So thank you, Sir Altamirano. We have from Ma'am Lourdes Gina Didulo Makalipay. Glad to be among the participants. Thank you for this webinar. Keep safe, everyone. Following from Rojas City, Capiz. Wow, ang layo ni Ma'am Lourdes. So thank you po, Ma'am Lourdes, for your comment. Oh, one more. Ma'am Janet Calata, watching from the Diocese of Bayumbong, Nueva Vizcaya. So, norte naman po. So, good afternoon po, Ma'am Janet. Thank you for watching our webinar. So, now let's go to our last couple. We have Mr. Teodoro and Mrs. Rosary Charity Rosello. Yes, good afternoon po.
Good afternoon po,
Good
Ms.
afternoon.
Lisa. Good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon to everyone.
So, so kay Ma'am Rosary po, Rosary
Yes po, ma'am.
Charity, pakwento naman po, pa-describe po ng inyong family. Saan po kayo based? How many years married? How many children?
Yes, ma'am. Nandito po kami sa ngayon, nandito kami sa Bacoor, Cavite. Connected po kami sa Diocese of Imus. Then, meron po kaming tatlong anak. Yung panganay, nagtatrabaho na po. At yung dalawa, nasa college, puro po sila boys. Then, 8 years na po kaming married. At yun, sa ngayon, yung husband ko po ay isang seaman. Seafarer.
Si Sir Rosello ay seafarer. So kay Sir, pa-share naman po yung experiences ninyo as working overseas bilang OFW. Kailan po kayo nag-start mag-abroad? Ano po yung work ninyo? And kumusta po yung work ninyo bago po itong pandemic na ito?
So, ako po si Mr. Doro Roselio. Isa po akong as chief officer sa isang cargo vessel. Nag-start po akong seafarer as October 25, 1989 pa po. Medyo matagal na. Nag-start din po ako sa lower rank at sa trainee hanggang sa inabot ko to ngayong posisyon ko na ito. And then, sa mga experience, masaya na mahirap ang pagkatrabaho sa barko dahil unang-una malayo ka sa pamilya. Before early 80s and 90s, communication is mahirap.
Yeah.
At hanggang ito lang present, medyo nakakabawi na dahil maganda na ang communication, mas madali na makipag-communicate sa pamilya. So sa mga experience na mahirap ang trabaho, pero napapasaya naman dahil narinig mo o nararamdaman mo na nandiyan yung pamilya mo na sumusuporta sa iyo.
So before po mangyari itong COVID, did you plan to stay abroad po? Nasa plano po ba na abroad muna kayo, seafarer muna kayo?
Yes, ma'am, kasi before this pandemic, nag-ano pa kami, still planning na mag-stay pa ng tulad din ng sinasabi ng ibang family kanina, nag-i-stay lang dahil gusto lang matapos yung pagpaparal sa mga anak. So yun, siguro still have mga 5 years pa may continue lang ito. Tapos, we are planning na settle down na rin para magpahinga rin ba? Para makapiling na totally yung pamilya na wala ka nang naisip na ibang gagawin pa. Ganun. Nasa time mo na sa buong pamilya na lang.
So, before COVID, 5 years, and then for good sana. So, ngayon po, sir, paano po naapektuhan ng COVID yung work niyo? How did COVID affect your work?
Ngayon kasi, affect ng pandemic na ito, medyo nagkakaroon ka na ng alinlangan ba? Yung doubt o pag-alala sa sitwasyon sa trabaho sa barko. Kasi nandun pa ba yung pagiging safe niya o nandun na ba yung stability mo sa trabaho? Kasi na nagkakaroon na ng ganitong problema, kasi yung mga principal na company is naapektuhan din eh. So malaki rin ang epekto sa amin na separer. Kasi kung hanggang kailan sila magiging matatag yung kumpanya nila or re-rehire pa ba kami sa separer. Yun ang nagiging problema sa apekto sa trabaho.
So, a lot of doubts and worries, mga pag-aalala po in terms of safety and job security.
Opo.
So, nung nalaman niyo po, sir, na kailangan yung bumalik ng Pilipinas, how did you feel?
Nung malaman namin na masaya din po kasi yan na po yung pag-uwi na yan po ay sa mga seaman, parang nakalaya ka sa trabaho mo. Para kang isang preso na pagkatapos mo yung makauwi ka na, yun ang pinakamasayang parte. Kaya lang yung pag-aalala mo lagi na dahil sa pandemyang ito, makakabalik pa ba o hindi na, ganun. Malaking epekto sa family kung wala ka na tabing pera, wala ka na ipon na pera. So, ano yung susunod? Pinag-aaral pa ka pang mga anak, anong susunod na akbang mo ba na pwede mong magawa? Walang napagandaan na ganito. So, yun lagi ang nagiging worry ng mga yung para sa part din namin o sa ibang family. Kaya sana para sa akin kung may chance pa makabalik, pwede pang bumalik.
So mixed feelings also, no, sir?
Mixed feelings.
Parang happy but also worried. And parang you don't know, hindi natin alam kung ano bang next na mangyayari. So nung pa-uwi na po kayo, na-quarantine po kayo, sir?
Nung nung umuwi ako bali maaga pa man, February pa lang yun, hindi kami na quarantine. So, but yung news na kumakalat nga, pero nag-stay na lang kami sa bahay doon na lang na quarantine ganun. Yun man ang advice ng company sa amin. Parang ganun.
Okay. So, self-quarantine na lang po.
Self-quarantine lang po.
Kayo na yung nagpusang loob po.
Opo.
So, nung nakarating na po kayo sa bahay ninyo, andyan na ulit si Mrs. Ano pong naramdaman ninyo?
Masaya po pag nandito na lahat sa bahay at kumpleto na. At medyo nabubuo mo na yung pamilya mo, nakikita mo na sila araw-araw. So, masaya po ang feeling lagi sa nakikita ang kumpleto ng pamilya ko.
Kay Mrs. Rosello naman po, so as when he returned po, nung pagpa-uwi niya, ano pong naramdaman ninyo?
Ay, ma'am, lagi naman po yan every time na uuwi siya, talagang masaya, excited, yung lahat na nandun, nag-iisip ka na kung ano yung gagawin nyo, ano yung priority nyo, lahat, isipin mo na, tapos yung mga anak, excited din, magtatanong, every time na umuwi kasi siya, sa paghatid at sa pagsundo, lagi kaming kumpleto, laging ganon. Kailangan, tsaka yung mga anak, parang, hindi mo makikitang, talagang inaantay nila yung babalik ng tatay nila.
So, very excited, complete ulit. Ano naman po yung mga challenges po na naranasan ng buong pamilya ngayong panahon ng pandemic? Challenges, problems?
Yes, ma'am, opo. Challenges, unang-una yung siyempre pagka ganitong pandemic, maraming bawal lumabas, bawal ano, yung kaba, yung kasi sabi nga natin, yung virus hindi natin nakikita. So, mahirap magtiwala sa paglabas-labas, lalo pat yung husband ko ang lumalabas kasama nung anak ko. So, lumalabas sila, nandun na gusto ko malaman ko nasa na sila, ah, kasi siyempre nakakakaba o baka yung safety lagi kailangan o ano yung mask nyo, yung ultimo pati yung gloves, sinasabi ko na dapat sana may gloves kayo, mga ganon. Yun ang ano, tapos ah, nag-iisip ka ng ano talaga, tsaka yung lahat medyo naiinip, yung isa pa kasi nga syempre dahil excited ka na nakasama mo yung aming tatay, ang ama ng aming tahanan, iniisip na namin iniisip na namin yung dapat namin gawin, and then nung nagkaroon ng pandemic, lahat nandun kayo sa bahay, yun lang. Parang nawala lahat ng plano.
Cancel lahat ng plano.
Cancel lahat ng plano. Yun po, ma'am.
So, marami pong mga problems. Ano po yung mga nagawa ng family ninyo to handle po, to deal with these problems?
With regards to yung handle, ang nakakatuwa lang kasi dahil siyempre, lagi kayo magkasama sa bahay at kayo magkikita. Ginagawa niyong makabuluhan yung time. In-ensure namin na meron kaming magagawa. Tapos yung mga bata, yung tulong-tulong kayo, yung sa lahat sila, tapos ginagawa mong masaya, yung time, kasi para hindi mainip. Oo, tapos nandun yung minsan magluluto ng sama-sama, mag-ihaw-ihaw, experiment, mga ganon, kumakanta ng magkakasama, ganon. At yung siguro ang pinaka-ano talaga namin, ang pinangahawakan talaga ang pamilya during this pandemic, yung pagdarasal namin, yun ang naging mahigpit sa amin eh. Naiintindihan, nakakatuwa kasi yung with our 3 boys na anak, na naiintindihan nila. Naging mahigpit yung aming pagdadasal every night na talagang puspusa na sabi namin kailangan during this time na hindi natin alam yung mangyayari sa susunod, kung ano yung na hinihintay or ano, kailangan nating kumapit talaga sa Diyos. Bukod kung siguro kung dati meron tayong trust, may tiwala tayo sa Panginoon, mas ngayon na dapat tayong kumapit kasi merong problema na hindi natin nakikita.
So, mas pa. So, prayers po, and then you cook together, sing together. So,
Yes, ma'am.
Lahat ng house chore sa bahay.
Even
Pinaprogram. Ganun.
Yes, ma'am.
Pati paglilinis sa labas, paglinis ng sasakyan, paglinis ng gray.
At bumili ng pool para mag-enjoy sila. Yung portable pool.
So, basta magkakasama po. So,
Yes,
last question po. Yes po. Last question po, how do you feel about the future? Ano pong nararamdaman ninyo tungkol sa hinaharap?
Sige, ako lang. Sa totoo lang po, kasi di ba pandemic, paiba-iba araw-araw, iba-iba yung nangyayari. Sabi nga namin, kailangan maging alerto ka sa nangyayari sa labas. Kaya lang ang worry mo, ano ang susunod? Ano ang susunod na mangyayari? Katulad ngayon, sabi nga ng husband ko, syempre di ba meron po ngayong to change. Actually, nakaschedule po siya. Pero nandun yung kaba, parang nakabahan ka pa rin na ano ba, ito yung trabaho niya, kailangan kong tanggapin, na kailangan namin maging open, tapos may nag-aantay na work sa kanya, kailangan niyang gawin yun. So, andun yung kaba pa rin, safe na ba? o paano na yung susunod, paano na yung magiging status ng trabaho, or paano na yung paglabas namin, yung lahat yung pag process mo ng mga dapat na gawin, yung pagtakbo, yung pag-aaral ng mga anak, paano na yung magiging sistema ng education ngayon, yung mga ganon, yung mga billings, mga lahat yun, iniisip mo paano na yung mangyayari sa susunod.
So maraming mga questions.
Yes,
What will
ma'am.
happen next, and then schooling, etc. So thank you po, ma'am and sir. Later po, babalikan namin po.
Yes, thank you, Ma'am
Thank you po.
Lisa.
Thank you. So, for Mr. and Mrs. Rosello, we see that the same is happening. So they're happy and worried at the same time. Happy that they're complete, but there are lots of questions on what will happen next, how they will deal with the changes, especially financially and also health-wise, because pandemic is still there. Okay, so we will read some more comments before we proceed with our next speaker. We have Ma'am Zeni Ramos Davalos. I salute all the seafarers who share their experiences for the betterment of their respective families. What they need is all-out support from everyone. Yes, so that's right, Ma'am Zeni. So we have to provide support to them. From Sir Fernando Abeto, their stories shows that they all caught flat-footed, yes, unprepared. And the moral of the story is that we must be prepared for the worst, save and invest wisely. Yes, na-mention din po yan kanina nila Sir Arce. And we have, I salute OFWs working hard to give their family better life. God bless you always. Yes, thank you for your comment. So just to summarize a bit the answers of the stories of our three OFW couples. So there's a lot of fear because of the pandemic. So fear that the husband or even their family here back home will get sick, and then we don't know what's going to happen next. And the husbands were planning to stay abroad until it's a range of around 5 to 9 years. So matagal pa sana abroad, but then they had to come home, and that brought about mixed feelings. So they're happy that they'll be complete again, happy together, but also unsure because, as mentioned also by a comment from our viewer, no, so they were not prepared because na pandemic happened all of a sudden. So I don't think anyone was prepared for that. So they had problems financially, and some of the children have to stop studying first. And there's a big question on when they can go back abroad again, when they can start working again. And they're able to do a lot of things also. So there are many problems, but they're also doing a lot of things to handle these problems. So one would be praying, or as Ma'am Rosello mentioned, pray even more. And then merong businesses, financial ways to deal with the problems. And then children are also helping out, both in terms financially and also in terms of household chores. And it seems that our three families are taking advantage of the time by doing things together, and yes, like cooking together, singing together, and handling all facing pandemic as one family. Okay. So we will hear again from our three couples later during our Q&A. So, but now let's go to research. Let us listen to insights from research, care of our expert, Dr. Lucy Jordan.
Good
All the
afternoon.
way from
Hello.
Hong Kong. Yes, good
All the
afternoon.
way from Hong Kong. I see we have some participants from Hong Kong, which is lovely.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So good afternoon. Really nice to be here. And also just want to say thank you so much, first of all, to the couples for for their honest sharing with all of us. It very really touches me to see the openness and willingness to share about the sort of private feelings, which probably are similar, I would imagine, to feelings that many other people may be having as well. And I think, that one of the things that often is so valuable about something like this is that sense of connection, with between others facing similar types of challenges, and hearing how people are coping, and also hearing that we're not alone in having an experience that we're having. Excellent. I'm just going to spend a few moments to just say a few things about research that are kind of related to what we're speaking about today. And then we will make more material available after the webinar for anyone who is interested in finding out much more about all of the details about the research. As mentioned in the introduction, I'm one of the leaders on a project, yes, the Children's Health and Migrant Parents in Southeast Asia. And this first slide here is just to give a bit of the project background, just to let people understand that we are looking at, in this particular webinar today, some insights from a part of the study that is in Philippines, and even more particular, the part of the study that is here in the Laguna area. And you'll see a bit more about that in one moment. So in this project, what we have done, working closely with Marla Assis at SMC and others in the local areas in Laguna and Bulacan, is to talk with families in a detailed way, collecting survey information from households that had parents of children in 2 age groups that were living away overseas. And then we also have sought households where there was no migration, so that we could try to understand similarities and differences between them. And you can see that we've spoken with them at 2 different times. So the first time was back in 2008. And then the more recent time was in 2016, 2017. So obviously that's before the pandemic, but up until fairly recent times. And you can see that we've had some similar composition of kind of people having long-term experiences of migration, similar to the stories we heard today. I was really touched by the similarity between the stories I've heard from the 3 couples here and some of the stories we have in our study. If Dax could turn to the next slide, that would be excellent. So I mentioned that I'm sharing a bit more about the stories from Laguna. And this is because in Laguna, we actually, in addition to doing a detailed survey, we actually spent time talking more on an in-depth way with members in a smaller number of the households. So you can see here that this is based on 81 different pairs of interviews, where we have some people who were had one or both of the parents working overseas, which, as I mentioned, is the main focus of our study. But by the time that we went home, there also were changes, in the households. Some households was the same situation, similar to our stories today, where the father was the migrant the whole time. Other households, it was the mother. Some it was both, right? And then we also had households that had return migration, which we see as similar, but also different to the return migration from the pandemic, of course, because often the conditions of return were usually different, under our study than this kind of very sudden and very global shock that happened with COVID. So if we could go to the next slide, that would be great. Excellent. So I wanted to say that what we kind of found in general when we did our first look at the research is sort of three different types of situations where, we have, kind of what we call maintaining the status quo, which is households where either they, our households were neither parent, it was a migrant, or one or both parents were migrant, and things stayed the same, over the decade that we have been talking with the families. So in some ways, those families I see as similar to a lot of the couples we spoke with today up until the time of the pandemic, right? Sort of like a continuous situation of the long-term seafaring careers of many of the gentlemen who shared with us. Then the second type is the households that have experienced the change in the migration status, during the time that we have had over that decade, where sometimes one person returned. Sometimes there's what we call a kind of relay migration, where one person comes and another person goes. And others are households that just stayed living together without anybody picking up the migration. And then the third type, which is something that we didn't hear as much about today, but is households where there's some kind of family change that happens. So, in kind of the most extreme situation, this is where there is a death of a parent, and then others, it's where there is a breakdown in the relationship between the couple, which may or may not be related to migration. So this is, kind of the three different types of things that we saw. Whereas I'd say that most of our households maintained. The second most frequent was a change in migration status. And then the third was that there was a family change, a significant family change. Yes, excellent. So, and then the final slide that I wanted to was just to share a bit of a kind of story related to each of the types. So I was struck by the similarities with what the couples were sharing too, about how for some households that have long-term experiences of migration, right, things are so different than they were in the 80s or the 90s or even the early 2000s, like Mr. I think Rosello was sharing, because of the change in the use of information computer technology, and that there's this way to be together, even when you're separate, in a different way than there used to be before there was so much technology that was so accessible to people who are both at home and people who are living overseas. And in fact, this is something that we saw change in the time we were following these families from the mid 2000s up to the mid 2010s. And then the other thing that struck me about similar was the piece around families where they are talking about what happens with return. And one of the things that I heard about was this experience of needing to kind of scale back and change some of the regular patterns and lifestyles, and also perhaps reconsider some dreams about things. And that there's sometimes as well, when we had father's return, was in some of our households, this idea that perhaps someone else would be able to go out in the future, in this instance, the mother. So again, this idea about having to make changes, but perhaps looking towards the future and the possibility. And then the final case that I mentioned here a bit is one of the family change situations where the part I wanted to highlight here, which I think might be relevant in some ways, is in our research, one of the things we find is that oftentimes when there's an overseas foreign worker, there can be a lot of pressure from the family, the extended family, around kind of the migrant and the person left at home, providing both emotional and also some financial support. And that in the instance of this one family, we experienced, there were some tensions between the more nuclear family and the more extended family that actually seemed to result in an eventual disruption and a breakdown. between the couple, and which, of course, is always a challenge in any family situation for any of the people in the family, the children and the members of the couple as well. So that's, I think, all I wanted to share right now. It's probably more than I intended to anyway, Melissa. And as I said, I'm happy to answer any questions and also to provide further information for people that want to look into the detail about things a bit more. Back to you, Melissa.
Yes, so I'm sure they want to know more about your research findings. So like what you said, there are similarities with the three stories, but there are also some novel insights from your research. So hopefully our viewers can check out your research with CHAPSI. So thank you, Dr. Lucy. So let us now listen to insights from practice. We have from Ugat Foundation, Father Nilo Tanalega. Hello, Father. So we'll know about experiences in counseling. Yes, Father. So pa-share
Good
po,
afternoon,
Father.
everyone.
Yes. Pa-share po, Father, your experiences in working with OFWs and their families for so many decades now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I could resonate with the shares in terms of the positives that are there. I think I have some slides that are okay. The first real slide, please. Okay. The bonding, yung pagkakataon po na magkasama-sama ang pamilya, yung pong sinalamin ng ating tatlong mga nag-sharing ngayon na mag-asawa. At napakalaking bagay yun sapagkat napakahalaga ang support system sa pagbabalik ng sino mang nasa abroad. Ang iba pang mga positibo na nating nakikita dito, pagbalik nila, yung mga tungkulin na gawaing bahay o pampamilya, napaghahati na ng mas mabuti. Kasi ang nangyayari pag nag-abroad ang isa, naging temporary single parent yung naiwan. Pati din naman yung nasa abroad. Pero ang tungkulin parang nabubuhos lalong-lalo na doon sa naiwan kasi siya mag-alaga ng bata kung ano pang kailangan intindihin sa local situation. Natutuwa sila na kung ano man ang naipon at yan ay bihira. Nadinig po natin. Marami po ang hindi nabayaran na kahit sila umuwi. At ang pero mamaya na yon. Sa positibo pa, natutuwa sila nasa bahay kasi nung una ay ng kanilang kahit sa mga bata, gawa ng mabuti nga, meron itong quarantine na ito. Hindi na masyado sa fast foods, kung hindi mga lutong bahay. So, mas nutritious ang mga bagay na ito. At gawa ng may pandemic, nagbibigay ng halaga ng kalusugan sa lahat. Ang pinakamalaking bagay, yung hindi talaga nasasabi nila dito, yung komunikasyon. Kasi yung pagsasama ay isang bagay, iba yung magsama at iba yung makipag-usap sa isa't isa. At ngayon, hindi na kinakailangan virtual o sa pamagitan ng mga gadget lamang o sa internet, kung hindi edad na. Pwedeng mas malalim, pwedeng tao sa puso ang kanilang binabahagi sa isa't isa. Kung gayon, nung sa panahon ng sila'y nagkahiwalay, naguhulaan pa kung ano talagang iniisip at anong dinaramdam ng bawat isa. Mabuti ngayon na nandyan na. So ito yung mga positibo na nakikita natin. May mga sa mga negatibo, at ito ay masasummarize natin sa dalawa. Actually, yung lungkot nakikita nyo, yung galit, at may mga may luha pa rin sapagkat ito po yung sitwasyon ng pagkawala. Sa English po, ang tawag po natin dito ay yung grieving process ay kailangan talagang daanan ng bawat tao na nawalan. At dito ay isang napakahalaking bagay, ang trabaho. Kasi ang trabaho, hindi lang trabaho. Sa isang nag-iibang bansa, kung ito may seafarer or land-based, ito na ang pinakabuong buhay niya. Ito na ang pinakadahilan kung bakit siya nag-abroad. Ay ito ay mawala o maputol. Napakalaking bagay ito sa kanya. At makikita natin dito yung iba pang bagay na kanilang alala sa kanilang pamilya, lalong-lalo na kung may utang pa. Na ay yung hindi pa nakabayad sa utang, yung placement fee at iba pang gastos, lalong-lalo na kung iyan ay napunta sa mga land-based na napakalaki ang kanilang binayaran sa mga agency at sa mga at iba pang mga arrangement, napakalaking dagok ito sa kanila. At ngayon, ang malaking bagay, yung gulo, ano yung meron silang anxiety na nakikita natin na nandoon tungkol sa kinabukasan. Kaya kung nakikinig kayo sa kanila, pag tinatanong, ano nakikita mo sa future, napakaikli po ng kanilang pananaw kung ano ang mangyayari. At gawa ng napakaikli ang kanilang pananaw kung ano mangyayari sa hinaharap, ito po ay nagdudulot ng anxiety. Parang humaharap ka sa kadiliman. No? At dahil dito, maraming psychological, emotional effects ito. Yung iba ho ay nagpapanik na rin dahil dito sa bagay na ito. At kailangang bigyan ng lunas, bigyan ng agarang solusyon ito sapagkat pag yan hong anxiety yan at panic ay lumaki ng lumaki, nakaka-apekto na rin to ng pangangatawan. Susunod pong slide. At yun pong karaniwang, kahit na karaniwang yung makasama mo uli ang iyong asawa at ang iyong anak, hindi po ito madalian. Sila po'y natutuwa na nakabalik sila, yung suporta na doon. Pero yung pakikisama mula ngayon, yung araw-araw na pakikisama na nung una, lalong-lalo na kung land-based na napakahabang panahon na nagkahiwalay, ano itong babalikan nila na magsasama uli. Kahit na yung narito sa Pinas, nung una po siya po lang natutulog mag-isa. Ngayon ay meron na siyang katabi. Yun po ay kumise nagbibigay ng anxiety. Paano ba ito? Yan. Tapos, yun pong pagkumpara ng sarili sa kanya mga kaibigan, sa kanya ibang mga kapatid na nasa abroad, na nagtagumpay, pero siya ay pinauwi. Malaking bagay ito na baka dinaramdam. Tapos yung iba, naghahanap ng sulit sa lahat ng kanilang pinadalang remittance o allotment din. Kasi tumitingin yan kasi malaking ang sakripisyo itong ginawa nila. Ang gusto nilang makita pag sila umuwi, saan naman ginastos itong mga bagay na ito. No? At bagay na dinar
Yes, so we have just some technical difficulties. So let me just have a short recap of what Father Nilo has shared so far. So there are positive effects of the OFW coming back home all of a sudden. So they have more time to bond together, physically bond together, lighter housework for whoever was left to do most of the housework while the OFW was away. They are happy at home, and it's easier to communicate because they don't have to communicate um, via use of mobile phone. Now they can talk to each other more easily and more deeply. But there are negative effects as shared by all of our speakers so far. So there is sadness, there's anger also, and what Father called a grieving process because the OFWs came home and it's not actually their choice. So they lost their jobs, and because of this loss, they have to grieve. And because it's a process, it takes time. So before, when they were OFWs, that was sort of their identity. That's their life. What Father Nilo said was it's their reason for going abroad. It's their reason for leaving their families for long periods of time. And then all of a sudden, they will lose their job. There are also those who had to borrow money in order to go abroad. And because of they had to be repatriated abruptly, they have now to figure out how to pay off these debts. And as we have seen, based on the answers of all three couples, no, there is anxiety for the future, which Father noted could manifest later on as effects on mental health and physical health as well. And Father also highlighted that coming back home also means dealing with each other again. So they were not together for long periods of time, and now they have to see each other the entire day because of the quarantine. So there are questions like, how do they get along now? What now? Now that there's a new setup for all of of the families. And Father also said the last thing he mentioned was that the OFWs want to see the fruits of their labor. Ano bang saan napunta yung mga remittances? Yes, Father?
Yeah. I want to move on to the next slide, please.
Okay.
Ayan. Sa board po, bilang summary, being repatriated is an experience of displacement into the unfamiliar again. Para po tayong nabundol sa naiwang nakabihasnan. So in other words, there's an adjustment and adaptation that is needed for those coming back now. Again, okay. Atin pong tignan naman itong bagay na sa mga anak. No? Kuminsan po yung mga anak natin, anong tingin sa atin? Kapag napakahaba ho yung panahon ng paghihiwalay, kuminsan ho ang nababanggit sa amin, bakit daw yung kanilang magulang ay alien na. Okay. So yung feeling ho ng mga abandonment, nandyan na, etc. Okay. At sa susunod na slide, please. Ayan. Ang mahalaga ho dito sa dalawang bagay na ito, yung karanasan ng pagkawala or grieving process at yung handling anxiety and stress. Marami hong bagay na nakakubli or hindi, sa English pa, yung hindi unconscious or subconscious level. Kaya po, bilang pamilya, bilang mag-asawa, meron po tayong dapat gawin. Hindi lang magkasama, kung hindi, meron pong dapat ginagawa habang magkasama. At ito po ay nasa sunod na slide ang akin pong rekomendasyon. Ito. Ang tawag po dito ay kusang ungkatan ng mag-asawa. No? O kaya yung dapat sadyain nyo na magtanungan sa isa't isa. At nilagay ko dito ang 5 steps o 5 mga bagay na dapat siyasatin. At ito po in sequence. No? Una, ano yung ayaw nila sa kanilang pagbalik o binalikan? Pangalawa, ano yung nagugustuhan pa rin nila sa pamilya o sa sitwasyon na narito para naman makita yung o mabalanse yung kanilang mga hinanakit, galit o sitwasyon ng pagkawala. At ang pangatlo, ano ang kanyang pangangailangan ngayon? Yun. Mula sa kanya bilang asawa o sa mga kasama sa bahay, no? Ano ang mga kailangan? Sapagkat pagbalik po niyan sa abroad mula sa isang buhay na nag-iisa o solitary, pagbalik niya dito, hindi na pwede yung buhay na nag-iisa. Kung hindi buhay na magkasama sa iba o social na po ito, relational. Kaya ating kukunin ang itong bagay na ito, ang pagkakataon na anong magagawa natin para tayo magtulungan kahit na yung mga emosyonal na pangangailangan ay matugunan. Ito ho yung letter C. At sa letter D, yun nga, very specific na sino ang makakatugon sa pangangailangan ito. Sa panahon ng kalungkutan, sa panahon na naa-anxious siya, no? Sino makakatugon dito at gusto mo ba yung gawin? Mahalaga yon. Tandaan nyo, ang malalim na bagay dito sa ating mga nag-iibang bansa, hindi lang trabaho ang nawala, kung hindi isang pangarap. Yung pong mga pangarap na yan, kahit na libreng mangarap, ay hindi ho naman ganun-ganun na lamang. Ang mga pangarap niyan ay ang pinakabuong hinaharap ng isang nag-iibang bansa o nag-ibang bansa. At ang tanong niya, makakamtan ko pa uli itong pangarap na ito. Sapagkat ang aking sarili ay konektado doon sa pangarap na yon. At sa panghuli, sa letter E, para maibaba natin dito sa lupa, paano natin malalaman na sapat na ang tugon na iyan para sa iyo? Tanungin po siya at magtanungan na rin kayo. Paano natin malalaman na natutugunan ito, mga bagay na ito? Kaya ito isang maikling mungkahi lamang para sa inyo na kayo'y mag-usap-usap kasi napakadali pong sabihin ngayon na nasa pamilya na kayo, maging suporta kayo sa isa't isa. Atin pong gawing isa tupad ang pagsusuporta, lalong-lalo na sa pangangailangang mga emosyonal na mga tao at relasyon sa pamagitan po ng mga katanungan na binigay natin. Yun po lamang ang gusto kong sabihin at kung meron kayong pangangailangan, kami po ay nasa crisis line ng Tasandalay at makikita nyo dito kung paano i-contact kami sa Facebook, sa Google Hangout o Skype. Ang karamihan po ng ating mga kasamahan, wala po silang masyadong pera at mahina ang mga signal sa Facebook Messenger, okay lang po yon. At kung kayo po ay meron pang mga kamag-anak, asawa sa abroad, kami po ay may serbisyo din sa iba't ibang lugar, hindi lamang po dito sa Middle East, sa Europa, at susunod na po o sa isang linggo sa Amerika po at sa Caribbean. Iyon. Kaya pwede kaming tawagan para maibsan man lamang ang mga dinadala ng mga tao. Gusto ko lang sabihin sa hulihan, may mga seryoso pong kaso na nandyan. Ayoko pong paliitin yung sitwasyon sapagkat meron na pong talagang nadidepress dyan at nawalan na ng buhay sa iba't ibang bahagi ng mundo. Ito po ay hindi biruan. Kaya kung kayo ay nangangamba na hindi natutulungan ang inyong asawa, sabihin niyo po lamang na maghanap ng makakausap at kung wala na, tawagan na kami dito sa Sandaline. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Father Nilo. Yes po. So, important really for OFW couples is to communicate. Kumbaga, the problem is not yet finished. So, there are lots of things that OFW couples need to discuss. Hopefully, we're able to take note of the steps that Father Nilo mentioned. And he also gave several information about Ugat Sandaline. And I would just like to share that apart from Ugat Sandaline, there are other online services that can be accessed. So that's Ugat Sandaline, and then there's also NCMH and a list of other online services, although some are not for free. That's in a Facebook of EAP. Okay. So thank you so much, Father Nilo. So it's time to look at questions from our viewers. We are receiving lots of really good insights, questions from our viewers, and we will read a few of them, and then the speakers can answer. First, if the recovery from the pandemic will take some time and incomes from abroad will dry up, how will you and your family face the future? You can have one couple to answer. Maybe do we have volunteers from our three couples? Meron po bang gustong sumagot? Or ako na mag-volunteer? Ayan, so Mr. and Mrs. Roselo po.
Ano? Sige, yun nga yung ano magiging future.
How will you and your family face the future po? Kahit na mahirap nga po talaga financially, ano po kaya yung mga naiisip ng Roselo family?
Oo. Bali sa amin po, napag-usapan, lagi naman po namin napag-uusapan. Actually, before the pandemic pa, nag-uusap na kami yung kung ano yung mga sustainable, yung mga possibility na dapat namin pwedeng gawin. Tapos, lalo na po nung nangyari yung pandemic, tinignan na po namin, at katulad yung nasabi ko kanina, meron kami mga plans. Tapos, including yung mga anak namin, nag-iisip na rin po ng mga pwede na nilang maitulong na pwede mapagkakakitaan, katulad ngayon, yung possible na kakayanin namin. Marami, sa mga anak po kasi namin, katulad ngayon, sila po, yung tatlo pong anak namin, nag-uusap po sila na meron silang gustong mga business na kaya nilang, small businesses kaya nilang gawin. Opo. Tapos,
ang preparation na lang namin ngayon is to, kung makabalik, meron po kaming savings. So, kailangan po lang po namin medyo dagdagan ngayon, and then talagang i-keep safe na yun for the future para in case na magkaroon talaga na o magtuloy-tuloy yung pandemya at hindi na makabalik sa trabaho, may option na po kami na stop at magsama-sama na lang po dito. So, yun po ang nagiging nakikita naming option is to wala mo nang ibang gagastusin ngayon, no extra purchase, walang bibilin o ano, maliban lang doon sa necessity items, and then keep saving, and then doon lang talaga. So, para may prepare lang yung sarili namin, yung buong pamilya may prepare.
So, needs only for now. And children are...
Meron pa po kaming pinag-iisipan na umuwi na lang ako ng probinsya. May probinsya pa po.
Opo.
Kasi mas, yung expenses is lesser at medyo mas magandang bumalik.
So, very proactive. Yes. Hopefully, other OFW couples who are watching got the tips that you just shared. We have more questions. What are from Ma'am Lady May Zidro? What are topics or issues that need to be discussed with the children of OFWs so the school can address their needs? We can ask, how about Mr. and Mrs. Arce? Mga needs po of children. Wala. we can go to, how about Dr. Lucy?
Sure. The needs of children. Well, I was thinking actually, I didn't share much about the children when I was talking, but when I was looking into some of the background in our research, one of the things I was finding is how aware the children are of everything, like especially like sort of the feelings, that are going on in the family, and how I think sometimes adults, parents may kind of think, oh, I want to sort of protect, or shield the children, but that actually creating a space similar to what Father Nilo was sharing about with the couples, for the children to also be able to, to talk about their fears, to talk about their feelings is, I think, really, really important. Because sometimes, that may not happen just because we think we're actually, doing a protective thing, but it actually could be, leading them to want to have some space to do that. So yeah, I wonder what Father thinks too.
Let's listen to Father. What do you think,
Yeah,
Father?
I go along with that. Family is relations together, and this includes all the small children. Kung ano ang kanilang, what do they actually feel, and how do they look at the future. Now it's building the future together.
Yeah.
It's not building the future alone as a material provider, as an OFW, but it is building the future together. Because if you are able to address the level of expectations of people, then there will be a more satisfactory family life. Kung ano man yung level na yon, basta pinag-usapan at nagkasundo, walang away yan. The problem is, some of us have higher ambition, or we have our own plans for the future, and they are left behind. So, katulad po ng sinasabi natin sa nakaraniwan, wala pong iwanan. At yan po ay sa pamilya din. Kahit na maliliit na bata, dapat kasama, they must be included in the discussion and planning for the future. Thank you, Lucy, for that.
Yes. So include the children as well. So you may continue to post questions, but we're running out of time. But we will address these questions later. We will reply to these in the comment section later. So for now, we learned a lot from our speaker stories. We want to hear one last time from our speakers. So let's start with our OFW couples. Mr. and Mrs. Camposa, what would you like to tell your fellow OFWs, your message po for other OFW couples who might be experiencing po the same situation?
Sa akin po, ma'am, dapat lang po na sa panahon na yun, dapat lang na huwag mawalan po ng pag-asa. Tulong-tulong lang po. Magtulungan po. Intindihin yung bawat isa. Kasi hindi naman po kasalanan ng halimbawa, hindi naman po kasalanan ng asawa ko kung nawalan man siya ng trabaho. Hindi naman po kung anong nangyari sa amin. Magtulungan lang po, tsaka manalig lang po sa taas po. Lahat naman po ng problema may solusyon, basta po nagkakaunawaan, tapos may po sa Diyos. Wala po.
So work together, support each other, have faith in God. So thank you po. How about po Mr. and Mrs. Roselo? Your message po to fellow OFW couples.
Para sa amin po, siguro yung maging open, yung open ng communication, yung magkakaintindihan, dapat ang mag-asawa, lalo na sa panahon ngayon ng pandemic, na dapat ready na mag-adjust at magkaintindihan ang bawat isa sa family. Mahalaga po yun. At lalong-lalo na ang pananalig at pananampalataya sa Diyos. Yun po yung ating laging pinangahawakan.
So, openness, communicate. Yes po, sir.
Sa akin, bilang isang separate, so pagka ganitong panahon, o let's say kung sabi na ako magtuloy-tuloy, yung sana magkaroon ng alternatibo na alternate na trabaho kung meron man dito sa atin, makapagpatuloy pa ba? Hindi lang yung sasabihin na mapagpagkakitaan pa. Kasi sa panahon ngayon, medyo mahirap talaga yung financial eh. So, lahat naghahanap ng trabaho. So, yun ang nagiging problema pa rin. So, kung sakaling makauwi yung mga, let's say, hindi lang para sa separate, sa land-based or sea-based, kung makauwi sila, yung may, sana kahit sa government, may matulong pa na alternate o may mapupuntahan pa rin sila. Ganun, na trabaho. O may tulong na maasahan. Ganun.
So, alternate work po. Dr. Lucy, your last words to our audience and OFW couples?
Well, again, I wanted to say thank you to the couples who shared, their experience and their feelings and their thoughts and their hopes with us today. And also, I found myself thinking that I hope that some of the couples or some of the listeners too may join us next week, which I think Ms. Marla will talk about that in a moment, because we have a series. And actually, I'm not just promoting it, but I think, it's relevant in a way to thinking about, work and livelihoods. And this is something that we want to explore a bit more. So I really hope that people may tune in next week and that we continue to learn from the wisdom.
Yes, connected to what Mr. Rosello mentioned, there are alternatives, and these will be shared next week. Father Nino, last words po.
Nabanggit ni Mrs. Pompeo na huwag tayong mawala ng pag-asa. Totoo po yan. Pero ang gusto ko lang i-remind sa inyo, ang pag-asa po ay hindi nasa labas sa atin. Kayo po ang pag-asa sa isa't isa sa malaming antas ng ating buhay. In many levels of our lives, hope is within us, with each other. And the more we communicate, the more we connect with each other and plan out things with each other, then that hope might be realized. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So hope is within us and with each other. Mr. and Mrs. Arce, nandito po kayo. So we'll just ask them to write their last words sa comment section. Oh, there, yes. Hello po. Are you back? Yes, hello.
Yes, hello
Yes,
po.
sir. Yes po. Last words po for our audience.
Come again, ma'am?
Message niyo po for OFW couples po.
Message daw.
Lolo ko kasi ang net.
Message daw.
Okay lang po.
Message po for other OFW po.
Yes po, sir.
Message ko po, think positive lang po palagi. Kasi pagka inisip natin itong nangyayaring pandemya, may stress lang po tayo. So, lagi lang keep in touch with family na sa nangyayari na to. So, tayo magkakatulungan para pamilya natin pag-uwi. Kasi stressful po talaga. Pag inisip po natin, talagang napaka-malaking magiging epekto sa atin. Kaya dapat po stay happy lang po.
Yes. So stay happy with the family. So thank you so much to all our speakers. Let us now turn over the floor to Dr. Marla Asis.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the very rich discussion and sharing. And I won't keep you very long. But before I announce the winners, first, let me really just thank all our OFW couples for their very honest and very candid sharing of their experiences. And of course, I'd like to thank Father Nilo and Dr. Lucy for also sharing insights coming from counseling and from a research perspective. Yes, ito na po yung pinakahihintay. As promised, I'm pleased to announce the finalists and winners of the best reaction papers to last week's webinar. So the Board of Judges shortlisted the best 8 entries, and out of the 8 entries, the 3 best reaction papers, all from the province of Rizal, were chosen. So I'm very happy to announce that the first place went to Juliana Marie L. Encinas. Second place went to Bettina Micaela R. Fider. And the third place went to Alodi Sherika A. Sibal. So we want to thank all the participants and cheers and congratulations to the winners. So this conversation, of course, has been made more engaging because of your participation, comments, and questions. Thank you for joining us. And we didn't have enough time to cover all the questions, but we will return to the questions, and we will also post the answers to the questions in the comments box. No? So please look out for them later on. I'd also like to remind our participants that your feedback is important to us. So please kindly complete the feedback form. The link will be posted in the comments section as well. So many thanks to the people behind the scenes, to the people of Dream Agri Media, Dax, Justin, and Jim, and of course to Kimberly, Juanilio, and John Paul Assis of SMC for their assistance with the preparations and attending to the webinar's technical needs. As mentioned by Lucy, the next 2 webinars will be about what happens after repatriation. On July 17, our webinar will explore employment prospects here in the Philippines, as well as employment prospects, possibly overseas, and even entrepreneurial prospects for OFWs and actually also for the general public. And the last webinar on July 24 will be very much focused on possibilities and prospects in the agriculture sector. Maybe just to announce beforehand, there are many programs that are offered by the Department of Education, particularly earmarked to repatriated OFWs. So I hope that you will also consider them. So once again, maraming salamat po. Our very heartfelt thanks to all of you. And we will see you again on July 17. Keep well and stay healthy. God bless you.